This is Brian McGovern from the Investing News Network, and I'm here today with Dan Ahrens, Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer at AdvisorShares Investments, to talk a little bit about the crazy week in cannabis investments. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, the MORE Act cleared the House of Representatives yet again, a historic vote, shows support for cannabis industry at large. But a lot of financial experts, are not sort of totally hitting the table on this one. Maybe let's start with your own perspective. What are you thinking about the vote, its significance, and its long-term impact?
Sure. It's news, of course, and the market liked it a little bit, but we didn't see, cannabis stocks, go up like crazy, really anticipating this to turn into law. But a lot of people are saying this time's different. So the MORE Act was presented in the House of Representatives, which is, very much Democrat controlled. This is a Democrat bill. And there's no great surprises at all that it passed the House and we'll move on. So it's good. But the reason a lot of people are saying this might be different this time, and when I say that, first of all, people think it has almost zero chance of really passing the Senate and moving on to other things in its current form. But that's fine. As I was saying, here's why it's different. There's a lot more support for some type of federal reform for cannabis, really coming from both sides of the aisle, really more than at any point in the past. People don't like the full bill in its current form, but people that are involved in this industry really don't care that it doesn't have a chance in its current form. In the month of April, it's widely expected that senators, Chuck Schumer is the primary one, although with support of Cory Booker, are going to present their own bill in the Senate. Another sweeping, wide-ranging cannabis reform bill that will expunge records, decriminalize, legalize, medical marijuana, enforce or support states' rights for adult use. All these things. Again, it's their own bill. It's partisan. It doesn't have much chance of passing in its full form. But there's a lot of discussion, and there's so much public support now for cannabis that all these things are just posturing so that we can have them approve at least safe banking. People didn't want to approve safe banking in the past because they really felt strongly we needed some social justice reform at the same time. We're getting so much discussion, so much debate, and so much support now. A lot of people feel that these bigger bills can get negotiated down and we can see safe banking and some social justice reform that people want.
I see, absolutely. Maybe as a bit of a recap for any investors catching up on these news, can you talk about the significance of the banking reform and what that would mean for the industry as it stands right now?
And my answer already got pretty long with your last question, so I apologize for that.
Please,
but
no worries.
There's a lot of competing bills for cannabis reform, and again, a lot of public support. What a lot of people feel is at least the fallback is safe banking. Right now, cannabis companies can't do banking in the United States. It's turned into a rather outrageous situation where these dispensaries are forced to be cash businesses primarily. They have to have armed guards, armored cars. They are doing all sorts of steps to try to protect their business, but dispensaries are being robbed at gunpoint. There's been people killed in robberies of dispensaries. Also, there's a lot of cries for social justice reform. Well, if somebody gets granted a license, they want to open a dispensary, but they can't do banking, how the heck are they supposed to get ahead? Again, The biggest companies, the biggest multi-state operators, it's a detriment, it's dangerous, but they're managing. But a new small operator, especially coming from minorities, people of color, et cetera, they're at a huge disadvantage because they can't bank. Now, the ramifications, though, are huge. We think these companies that are state legal, doing legal business, whether it's medical marijuana or adult use by state law, should be able to do the simple step of using a bank. Now, once we do have safe banking, that should lead, in almost everybody's opinions, to other steps. Other steps like being able to list on the major stock exchanges in the United States, like NASDAQ or the NYSE, or even the Toronto Exchange. It could also lead, in most people's opinion, to 280E reform. Now, that's a tax law left over from decades and decades ago when people were money laundering. And it's so drug businesses, illegal drug businesses and drug dealers can't deduct business expenses. It's rather ridiculous that this rule, 280E, affects multi-billion-dollar cannabis operators in the United States. It's another step, another one of the dominoes that might fall after we get safe banking passed at a federal level.
I see, absolutely essential for the industry at this moment.
Certainly.
Maybe Dan, we saw quite a volatile week this past week as the vote clear in the House.
Yep.
Now, maybe tell me about, from your expert perspective, how things are settling in at the moment, and just your takeaways about the market performance over the whole week.
Sure, it has been volatile, and I try not to get into predictions. We may have bottomed out, we may not have, I don't know. But big picture, I can't shy away from the fact that cannabis has been in now about a 14, 15 month drawdown. I mean, it was very early in the spring of 2021 where cannabis stocks peaked. They maybe got a little bit too high, a little bit too fast after elections in the United States. But it's been a long, brutal drawdown since that time with many little ups and downs in the meantime. But things may have bottomed out. And it's interesting to look at the performance in actual sales, revenue, growth of multi-state operators in the United States. They're selling a lot of cannabis, and they haven't even had adult use sales take place yet in New Jersey, which has approved it. A little bit behind that, New York, which has approved it, and a number of other states that are thought to be coming online with adult use in the near future. So the future is bright, and sales are strong right now, but stock prices don't reflect it at all. The multiples that these companies are trading at look very, very attractive right now. And some people try to get really simple and say, oh, it's just like what we saw in Canada. Now, I say Canada because Canadian cannabis companies were able to list on the New York Stock Exchange. They're able to list on NASDAQ. Their stocks went through the roof a couple of years ago. And they trade still a lot more volume than companies in the United States do. But they're not attractive operators for the most part. You have to be very selective if you're looking at Canadian operators. There's not enough citizens in Canada to support all the weed. There's not enough sales or demand for cannabis in Canada to support all the weed. It's a little bit like an average to mid-sized state in the United States with the opportunity. So very different business models when you drill down and look into what happens in a Canadian operator. They can't sell THC marijuana products in the United States versus a US operator. Well, they have to operate only in the states which they're legal in the United States. But they've been much more frugal. They've been smart and steady in their growth. They haven't had an outrageous executive pay because they don't have access to the capital these Canadian companies have had. It's very important to understand the difference between a Canadian operator and a US operator. we think the US is where the real opportunity is from now, from today's prices. It's really easy to look at the US operators. In one of our funds, we hold some of those Canadian operators. I'm not thrilled with them, but I know that they trade up on hype and excitement whenever people talk about cannabis reform in the United States.
And excitement is still related to their wide availability in senior exchanges, or do you get the sense that there is still a misconception about how quickly those Canadian companies may be able to pursue US plays at some point?
It's both of those things, Brian. If there's any talk about something happening in the United States, your average citizen still drops names like Tilray and Canopy and Aurora. Those are names they've heard of. They think cannabis company, those are cannabis companies. They're listed on the exchange. But they don't really understand those companies can't really do marijuana business in the United States. If the United States has a full legalization, maybe those companies can come into the United States, whether it's opening shops in the United States or doing acquisitions in the United States. But most people feel that full-blown legalization is not coming or coming anytime soon. The next part is, will those companies actually be able to cross the border and enter the United States? And there's a lot of debate, a lot of misunderstandings of what that could or should look like. They could possibly acquire their way into the United States, but most people feel they'd still be very far behind the ball. They don't have operations yet in the United States. They don't have dispensaries in the United States. They don't have brands in the United States. Could they enter? Yeah, but we already have well-capitalized multi-billion-dollar companies operating in the United States under the current model.
Absolutely. Maybe as a last thing, speaking of those US companies, we're starting April. What's kind of been your takeaway so far for the performance of the market in the US, and maybe some highlights from companies in the multi-state operator line?
Sure. It's interesting in the United States, we really like most of the top operators, the largest operators. They have a little bit different DNA, a little bit different personalities, but we really like Trulieve. They're famous for dominating the Florida medical market. And it gets really interesting when you really think medical market. They don't have adult use yet in Florida. People think it's probably coming in the next couple of years sometime. But it's a very high profit, high margin business in Florida. And Trulieve has done a great job of putting that into other states. Their sales have still been very strong. Green Thumb is another operator we like an awful lot. Those are our top two holdings, by the way. And they really do a great job, keeping their head down and just operating successfully with good brands, good dispensaries. They're well liked. They really dominate a lot of the Midwest area. And our third and fourth companies, Verano, another strong one, and Curaleaf. Curaleaf is the biggest operator in the world and biggest in the United States by their footprint. They operate in more states and more markets than anybody else. An interesting thing is, some people were saying ahead of time that sales might be softening a little bit, looking at fourth quarter earnings coming out. And I told people, I really don't care about that. If somebody's a little bit soft versus some analyst estimates about what they expected, because if you look at the bottom line growth, quarter over quarter, year after year, these companies are still growing like crazy, knocking it out of the park for total revenue growth. Especially when we can compare that to what's happening in Canada in many cases. Sometimes the earnings come out of Canada and it's about cutting expenses, laying off employees, shutting down productions. A very different story. So if fourth quarter was softening just a little bit, I want to remind people to remember to look at the bottom line of what is total revenue growth, and then look at states and markets that are still coming online. New Jersey is going to start adult use sales very soon, and we're really excited about that.
Okay, Dan. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Do you have any last word of advice for investors out there listening?
To be patient, be very patient, and have a long-term focus. Because I've written about this and talked about it many times. Any kind of new volatile area, and cannabis is still new, it can be frustrating as hell, and you better have a very long-term focus for it.
Absolutely. Well, then, thank you so much for your time. As always, we appreciate it. Looking forward to the next catch up.
Thank you. Good talking to you.
For the Investing News Network, I'm Brian McGovern. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for even more expert interviews and our weekly recap. We'll see you next time.